Hi everybody, this video is going to show you how to make the castle, or at least the main part of the castle, in BlocksCAD. So the first thing we're going to do is I have my project open. I'm going to go to the instructions. So we first read the green. Can you efficiently make the castle? Efficiently says, ooh, I want to use a loop. So the pillars on the top are called ramparts, and it would take a lot of code to make each one. So let's use a loop to create a row. And that also gives you a hint that you are going to have to create each row separately and add some more code to it. So the first thing we need to do is just take a cube and render it to make the base of the castle. Now that is too small, so I am going to make that a lot larger. I'll just try 100 by 100. And that's a good size. We'll need to translate it, but it's not high enough. So let's try a little higher. I don't think I want it. I want it high, and maybe I'll put it at 50. So that's a decent height. And now I need to translate it to be in the middle of the grid. So we'll take the X and translate it, and the Y and translate it by -50 each. Keep the Z because we want it on the ground, and that is centered. So that's a great place to have it. Now that this is done, I can collapse it and just get it out of the way. So now we need to get another cube or sphere. I'm going to use a cube. I guess you could use a sphere for the ramparts. The other thing we're going to have to do is disable the castle so we can see the small little ramparts. So we can see that, and that is too large. So I'm going to cut the X and Y in half, and I'll keep the Z that size of 10. So that looks fine. But we do need to translate that out of the way so we know where to put it on the castle. So let's get a translate. And the Z will need to go up. And actually, let's take a look at our castle. And the Z is 50 on the size of the block. So let's translate that up 50. We can enable this to see where it goes. So now we can zoom out and say that goes right in the center. Great. Height is good. So now we just need to move it to one of the edges. So I'm going to translate it on the X 50. You can see it comes out a little too far because this is not a centered cube. Oh, and it's a tiny bit on top. So I'm going to take this 50 and make it 48 in the Z. Bring it down a little bit. That's better. And then this X, I'm going to make 45 to bring it back because we need it to go back the whole width of the cube. And there we go. It's at the edge. Perfect placement. However, it's in the middle. And since we're going to use a loop, we're going to want to start at the left and go to the right. So now I'm going to translate this on the Y by a -50. That's dotted there. -45. Let's see what the -45 is. No, we might need that to go -50. And perfect, right in the corner. So now what we'll want to do is use a loop to put a whole bunch of them. And I'm just going to count these little 10 unit sections down the bottom. I don't need to count them. I know how many there are because of the size of my cube. So these are 10 millimeters or 10 units for our purposes. And we can see this is 5. So if we put one at every section, we would have 10 because our cube has a length and a width of 100. So we'll need 10 of these going across. So that will help us with our loop. So let's grab a loop and we can put it around our little rampart. And then we're going to count I from 1 to 10 by 1, but we want to count 1 to 100 by 10. 1 to 10 by 1 will give us the 10, but we want them spaced out, and we want to use this variable I. So let's take a look at what we have now when we render it. because we translate everything in the same spot, that they're all showing up in the same spot. So you can't tell that they're there. But we do have 10 because it will take one at 1, it will take one, it will add 10 to it, it'll take one at 11, and so on and so on. So let's go into variables and get the variable I. And we're going to translate this along the Y. We can put I in the Y, but that's probably not going to work because our first Y is negative 50. So we want it to start at negative 50. Let's just put that Y in and see what happens. I mean the I. So you can see that's really nice. They're far apart from each other. Each one is 5 units wide, and there's 5 units in between because we have our 1 to 100 by 10. But we need it to start over here, all the way on the left. So we'll need to get a math block to move it. So we'll get the math block, and we'll use the I in the math block. And then we'll take negative 50, because that was our starting point, plus I. And we'll put that in Y, right? And then when you hit render, it starts at the edge on the left and goes to the right. And you can actually see that there is 1 unit because we start from 1 to 100. So if you wanted to move that over, I think we could go from 0 to 99, which is not a big deal. You don't have to change it. But then it lines up at the very edge. And there we have it, 1 row that is working out really well. The next thing that we'll need to do is duplicate this and modify it. So I'm going to label it first. I'm going to label this first row. We call it ramparts. Then I might not collapse it yet, only because I may modify something. I may not need to modify something, but just in case. So let's duplicate it. So now what we need to do is translate this one somewhere else. And now I can collapse this. So that is our first row. If we just render it, it shows up in the same place. Let's move this one backwards. And then we'll just need to translate it on the X because that is the X direction. And it looks like we'll need to translate it in a negative direction. So let's try that negative 50. As you can see, the negative 50 takes it in the middle. So we're going to go to a negative 100. And you can kind of see how there's a lot of trial and error. But if you make an educated guess, there's a good chance you won't need that many. Okay, so here we go. The negative 100, too far off the edge. So we're going to need to take that back by 5 and do it negative 95, which actually makes sense. There you go. Perfect. Done. Second row is done. So now I can label this. Second row. Or I can label it back row. Whatever makes sense to you. Oh, that didn't work. And then I can collapse it because I didn't have to edit anything inside. And now I have the second row. I think I'm going to go to the first row next, duplicate that, and then we'll have to put it this way, which will mean we'll need to rotate it in a particular fashion. Okay, now to move on to the third one, if we render this, 2 will be on top of each other, so we can't see them. But we know we need to rotate because they need to face in the other direction. So let's go in and get a rotate. Snap it with our first row. And we want it along the Y. Well, we want the Y in front of us. Remember when we talked about rotation? Put the axis that you want to rotate on in front of you. So we'll have to rotate this, and we can try to rotate it on the Y and see what happens. So we'll start with 90 degrees. Oh, and you'll see that didn't work. And the reason is because these have already been translated. So they've been translated out. So we'll put that back. And also remember to start with rotate only on one axis at a time. So let's try the Z. Because it's been rotated out, we want to flip it. So let's take a look at what the Z does. Oh, beautiful. Perfect. Looks great. Now that we have this, the last row is in the back, so we don't need to rotate that again. All we need to do is translate it. So let's duplicate this and then get a translate. And we will need to translate it along the Y. And let's try a negative 95 and see if that gets us in the right place. And it looks perfect. The only thing that I don't think is a big deal is you have a long one here and these two aren't touching. So you could actually move this over a little bit, but I don't think we need to worry about that. I think this looks great. One thing I will do is change the color. So I'm going to get a color block. Choose the color I want, like a grayish. And then I'm going to put enough sockets in there to put all my code. And then this gives us the basic castle. Give us all the same color. I'm actually going to collapse this and label it. So let's just render it. If we don't like the color, we can change it a little bit. A little too green. I'm gonna I'll try a gray. Oh, that I like. Okay. I even go one shade lighter. It's all up to you. You can make the castle any color you want. And then I am going to add a comment and label this castle base. And then I'll collapse it. Make it nice and neat.
Taking your breath.
Now what you can do is add other things to your castle, but you have nice, neat code packaged, and there is the base of your castle.